All right, everybody, welcome to another session of the HSP Awakening Summit. My guest right now is Linda Binns. And Linda, I'd love it if you would start us out and maybe just tell us a little bit about your HSP origin story. And so basically, when and how did you learn that you were a highly sensitive person? And how has that affected your life and relationships in the time since then?
I probably found out I was HSP about 15 years ago. I grew up knowing I was very different. It was very often pointed out to me how different I was. You know, you're too sensitive. Why can't you be like other people? Get over it. I learned at a very young age, I perfected the art of being invisible. So I wouldn't get noticed. Because I was so heavily criticized for not being like everybody else, you know, I really did learn to shut myself down. And it wasn't until I left my home environment and started working that people used to tell me what a great job I did. And I just started questioning the beliefs that I had that had been formed when I was a child. But then I started learning about energy, which is what I do, really just out of my own personal interest. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized this was something I loved and I had to share it. And so I had started my business. I've been in business for a few years. And then somebody told me about the book, The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. And I didn't pay much attention at first. And then somebody else mentioned it to me. And ultimately I thought, okay, I'll read this book because there might be something in there that I can help my clients with. Mm-hmm. And so I read the book and it was like an epiphany. Finally, I make sense. Now I understand everything that happened to me as I was growing up and everything that's happened to me throughout my life, why I feel the way I do, why I struggle with the things I struggle with, and why I've always felt so different. So it's like that book gives you permission to be yourself, and you can finally find self-acceptance through it. So it really was a revelation to me. And I haven't looked back since I read that book.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. There's so many parts of your story that I definitely resonate with, and I'm sure our viewers do as well. But thank you for sharing that part of your journey. There is something so magical is the word that comes to mind at the moment for that discovery. And like you said, the level of self-awareness, and in some ways, just the way that it almost just clicks in an instant when you realize that. And the way Elaine Aron, I believe, describes it at one point is the idea of putting the pieces together, looking backwards. And you can almost look back through your story and suddenly you understand why certain circumstances unfolded the way they did, why you reacted to certain situations the way you did. And it's just this huge, almost sigh of relief, I think, that many of us experience in that moment of, oh, I'm not weird, I'm not broken, I'm not strange, there's nothing wrong with me. This explains why I am the way I am. And one of the things that's come out of many of the other conversations I've had with the other speakers so far in the interviews is this idea of suddenly finding yourself in the midst of this brand new community as well. And other people who are wired like us, other people with this same genetic trait who have had these similar experiences. And so, it's just, I love hearing stories like yours. And I know you've shared some with me a little bit in the past as well on some of the posts I've had on LinkedIn. But it just knowing that we're not alone, knowing that there are others like us, and knowing that now that we've journeyed a little bit further than some of them, we can help them on their journey is incredible as well. And I know that's part of the work you do. So I'd love to hear if you'd share with us, what do you do, who do you help, and how do you help them?
So my specialty is energy. I started, 26 years ago as a holistic health practitioner focusing on nutrition and a feng shui consultant. So back then, you know, what I didn't realize, it's kind of energy of the body and energy of the environment. So it always came down to energy. And so I ran my business for about 9 years, and then we moved. So I'm from England originally. We moved to the US, and that's where I started my business. And then we moved from Missouri to Idaho, and I kind of had to start again. And it gave me an opportunity to really rethink everything. Mm-hmm. And I worked with a business coach and realized that my focus is energy. It's not so much about the tools, it's energy. And there are various ways to understand energy and to work with energy. And so I then went more into energy kind of guidance coaching. I kind of see it as energy interpretation and translation, helping people understand the energy behind what they're doing or what's happening for them in their lives, and how you can change the energy and bring about really any change that you want in a more positive way in your life. And so that's always been my passion. And then I moved again. So over the years, my business has sort of evolved to doing a lot more online stuff. I work with a lot more people, not just in a geographical location, but all over the world, which is wonderful and ideal for an introverted HSP. But you're so right. I mean, the relief of finding that there are other people like you, you're not alone, a whole 20% of the population or so. But one of the things I did realize was that just naturally, the people I worked with were HSPs. I know it now. I can look back and say, oh my gosh, yes, that's why, because I understand them and I know how to help them. So I tend to specialize in working with HSPs, primarily professional women, trying to strike that balance between, being their authentic selves, because they often feel like they can't be their authentic selves in the workplace or in their business, because they're always trying to fit in. And I certainly did this, trying to fit into other people's expectations and, what is expected of them, and trying to force themselves to be what other people want them to be. And that might work to a point, but you definitely reach a point where it's almost like, I call it an invitation, to figure out who you really are, because that doesn't work anymore. So usually I see them at the point where things that used to work don't work anymore, and we've got to figure out why.
That's beautiful. I love how you've described that, and especially the way you described the evolution of your business. And it sounds like in a lot of ways it's evolved to meet the true needs that you were perceiving along the way,
Yes.
and to meet those at a deeper level as you've grown to understand things more, but also just as you've seen the deeper needs behind the people who are reaching out to you. And that's awesome.
That's
I know.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Yeah, well, and so many of the posts that I see that you put up on LinkedIn, I enjoy, because the way I always think of it is that they're profound, but they're also very practical. And so I always stop to read them, just because I know that there's wisdom there, and there's a lesson there, and it's worth slowing down for. And so even just that, I think, shifts my energy when I come across those. So I can't imagine just having an extended conversation and doing that deeper work with you. I'm sure. And I know from the testimonials you've posted that your clients experienced some amazing results from your time together. So
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, simple and practical, that really describes me, and that's my approach. It can be deceptive, because sometimes you think it's so simple, how can this work? But it really, really does. And yes, I love to keep things simple, and there's great power in that, in the simplicity.
Absolutely. Well, with that in mind, I can't wait to dive into our topic today. So I know we're talking about how to step up and be heard as an HSP. And so if I understand right, what we want to do, you've got 3 strategies that you're going to share with us now, but then we'll also have a download linked later on where they can find 7 more strategies. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Well, if you want to dive into those, I'm excited to hear what you have to share.
Okay, great. Well, the first thing you have to know is that, as someone who perfected the art of being invisible, as an HSP, as a profound introvert, the kinds of things that terrified me the most were talking in groups of people. At school, I wouldn't even raise my hand to answer a question, because I thought it was always going to be wrong. In my English exam, I got a C, because we had to do a group discussion, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't participate in the group discussion. So that's how bad it was for me, that I could not use my voice. I could not speak up. So what I want to tell you is that I've used these 3 strategies I'm going to share, and the other 7 that I'll share, but these work. if I can do this, I promise you anybody can do this. So the first strategy always has to be, and you mentioned it earlier, self-awareness. Because until we know ourselves, I always think that if you don't know yourself, somebody else will want to tell you who you are. If you don't know who you are, somebody else wants to tell you or force you to fit into their expectations. So it's knowing things like, what do you love? What's important to you? What do you value? What energizes you? What drains you? And in terms of being highly sensitive, each of us as a highly sensitive person has degrees of sensitivity. Some people may be more sensitive to smell than others. Some people may be more sensitive to sound than others. But it's taking the time, and it's a daily thing. It's an everyday thing. It's not something you do and then you're done. To really understand yourself and be willing to learn about yourself. That has to be the first step in everything, because understanding who you are is the key to being able to change anything or do anything, live your best life, I want to say, really. And that's why when we talked about reading Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person, the change that happens when people read that book, because it's an understanding, it's a developing of self-awareness, it's an understanding of this is who I am. So I see it as the beginning to that, but it has to be the first step is really understanding yourself and being willing to pay attention. So something affects you, somebody says something, or you walk into an environment and suddenly you don't feel good, paying attention to that. And really learning about the things that affect you in a good way, in a not good way, because then you can focus more on the things that affect you in a positive way and learn how to deal with the things that affect you in a negative way. But it always has to start with self-awareness. You have to know yourself at the deepest levels and not let other people tell you who you are or how you should be or fit into their expectations. So that's really the first step. And again, very simple, not easy necessarily, but definitely the first step.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love how you unfolded that, and that sense of self-awareness within ourselves, with in terms of our emotions and our thoughts and what's going on inside of us, but then also self-awareness in terms of how we interact with our environment and the stimuli that are coming in from outside of us, and monitoring how we're responding to those things as well. And so I don't know that I'd ever thought of self-awareness at those two different levels, but that makes perfect sense. Learning to sit back and and not judge those things, not decide, oh, I'm weird, or I'm strange, or I'm broken, or I'm damaged, or I'm doing this wrong, but just how do we naturally react and respond within ourselves and within the situations we step into. And you're absolutely right. I think, especially in terms of highly sensitive people, that's something that's shifted majorly within me as I've grown as a highly sensitive person and learned to understand the trait more, is that I'm much more aware of the environments that I'm walking into and who's going to be there and where I'll find energy, what people energize me in that environment, and then what people may be a little bit more draining. And so not that I just completely cut those people off, but that I've learned to gravitate more towards the energizers and spend a little bit less time with those that'll drain me. And then also just to know when my battery's feeling depleted and it's time for me to head on out. And so that's but I love how you broke that down and planted those seeds for us to think about later on in terms of each of those areas. That is an amazing place to start. I agree.
So that leads us into the second part then, which is making yourself a priority. Because once you know who you are, what's important to you, what you need in order to be able to thrive, to feel good, you have to be willing to speak up. You have to be willing to put yourself first. Now, again, I am a confirmed sort of helper personality. It comes so naturally to me to want to help other people. Somebody needs help, I'm there. Somebody asks for something, I'd be more than happy to do it. What didn't ever come naturally to me was taking care of myself and knowing what my needs were. Yeah. But what I learned very profoundly was that if you don't value yourself, other people won't value you either.
Wow.
You know, so if you find that you are not appreciated, you're not valued, you're being disrespected in any way, you have to take a look at how you're treating yourself, because that's simply a reflection of what's going on for you with yourself. And I remember years ago, a wonderful friend who was an energy healer, I was having a lot of difficulty with a particular person who just kind of attached herself to me. I think that tends to be a thing for some highly sensitive people, usually the introverted ones, is that some toxic people, aggressive people can kind of be attracted to your energy and sort of attach themselves to you. And I didn't know how to stand up for myself to this person. And we were supposed to be going to this event together, traveling to an event together. And she wanted to share a room with me. And there was just no way that I wanted to do that. So I wanted to say no to her. And I agonized over that for so long. Eventually I did say no to her, but I said to my friend, you know, I really don't understand it, because this person was very aggressive. She would speak really rudely to other people, kind of mean to other people. And I said to my friend, I don't understand it. I understand the concept that other people can be mirrors in our life, showing us something about ourselves. And I said, I just don't understand what she's showing me, because I could never treat anybody that way. I just couldn't do it. And she very quietly said to me, no, you wouldn't be like that with anyone else, but you are quite mean to yourself.
Oh, wow.
I thought, oh my gosh, that was it. Yes. And that was actually a turning point for me. It was a point where I started to look at, how can I love myself more? How can I start to treat myself better? And there really is a correlation between how people treat you and how you treat yourself. We really do teach people how to treat us. You know, and so it has to be, you have to be willing to make yourself a priority, and to be, and that means to say, no, that doesn't really work for me. Or if you've been to an event, like you mentioned earlier, if you start to become exhausted, to be willing to say, you know, I'm really ready to go, I need to leave early. I learned that if I went to a conference or some kind of event where there was a lot of people, I would usually, the energy would be so intense that I would end up with a bad headache, just not feeling good. And I had forced my way through those situations so many times. And then once I learned to put myself first, I learned that I could simply say to people, you know what, I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed right now. I'm just going to step outside for 5 minutes and I'll be right back. And people said, okay, that's fine. You know, people were fine with it. I think the other thing I've learned is that people want to know what to expect. So if I need something, I can't expect other people to know that I need that. So it's up to me to say, this is what I need, this is what I'm going to do. And I've learned that people are fine with it. If you respect yourself enough to make yourself a priority, and self-awareness has to come first, because if you don't know what's important to you and what energizes or drains you, then you won't be able to make yourself a priority. But just being willing to do that is really the second key step.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, there's so much value there as well. And I think you're right, especially those of us who are highly empathic by nature, which most of us as HSPs are, and there are those of us who might even identify as an empath on top of that, which I think is kind of a subgroup within that highly sensitive person, but that's a discussion for another time probably. But you're right, there is something about us that seems to attract narcissistic people, or even people I would say maybe that would be described as energy vampires.
Yes.
And so I love the lessons you shared there, especially just in terms of boundaries, and how we can start to establish those things. But I think there's so much wisdom in what you shared about there has to be an element of self-awareness and self-love and self-worth that says that, no, I'm allowed to love myself enough to set boundaries with this person, to take care of myself, to plan time for self-care activities. And really, you know, I think at the beginning for many of us, it can feel like there's a selfish element to that. And the way that I try and help my clients understand it is the way that I've come to understand it. And it's not selfishness. It's actually just a healthy level of self-interest. You know, we learn to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of other people. And when we do that, and I think that that's at the core of why so many people experience burnout, is because they try to be selfless to the point where they end up actually harming themselves and getting completely drained. but they're so afraid of taking time for themselves or putting those boundaries in place that it might hurt someone's feelings, that it ends up having the opposite effect that can be just as devastating as extreme selfishness, where they burn out and they're just, they run themselves dry. And so I think
Yeah.
that middle ground of healthy self-interest is so pivotal. And I love how you explored that. And you're absolutely right in terms of the self-awareness and how those work together. So thank you for exploring that.
Yeah, it's really true that, and I've done it. I really started to study energy and learn more about energy because I was burning out myself.
Okay.
Where it's when we put others first, which we think is a wonderful thing to do, right? It's a great thing to do, not when you do it at the expense of yourself.
Yeah.
If you put yourself first, then you have so much more to give to anybody else, and you are giving the best of you. So
Absolutely.
it's the opposite of selfish. And I didn't know how to put myself first. It truly never, ever occurred to me. One of the hardest questions for me, and it's often one of the hardest questions for my clients to answer, is what do you want? What's important to you? And it's a really hard question sometimes for them to answer, because they're so used to thinking about everyone. They know what everybody else wants and what everybody else needs, and they're there to provide it. But when it comes to identifying that for themselves, they get lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Christine Kane wrote about that a little bit about that in her book. And she talked about a lady that came to one of her seminars that said she literally could not remember a time she had thought of herself in 50 years, and she just said she had gone through school and gotten married and had a family. And so she just got used to putting everyone else first. And, again, there's a beauty to that desire to help and take care of other people. But I love how you express that, and that idea that when we take care of ourselves, we're able to show up and be fully present for the people that we love, and we're able to give them the best of our energy and the best of our enthusiasm and be right there engaged with them. And I think so many of us, if we look at our lives, we can see maybe where there has become that disconnect, where our energy is so pulled by work or other obligations that with our family and friends, we really don't feel like they are getting the best of us.
Right.
And so I love that insight, because it plants that seed of, wait, am I doing well in this area, or am I sacrificing the best of me to something that's really not worthy and deserving of that energy? And do I need to reevaluate where that's going? So I love that you've challenged us with that, because the other side of that is exactly what you're saying, which is that ultimately, if we have a desire to help other people, we can multiply that impact by taking that time and the rest that we need to re-energize ourselves, so that we're always showing up at our best, and so that we put limits and boundaries into our lives to protect that energy. So that's amazing. I love that. Thank you.
Yes, that's very well put. Very well put. And then the third step is to really tap into your inner extrovert, which sounds a bit strange coming from an introvert. But what I've learned is, okay, there's introvert, there's extrovert. We tend to think of ourselves as one or the other. And certainly one of those traits is more dominant than the other, usually. Some people are fairly equal between the two. But what I have learned is that, for example, when I'm talking about, I love to be quiet. I love to sit, people, if I'm in a group and there's a group discussion, usually I'm the one sitting there listening. And if I have something to say, then I will definitely contribute it. But I'm participating by listening. So I don't always have a great deal to say. But if I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, goes back to self-awareness, so I have to know what that is. It's hard to shut me up sometimes. I can go on, and that's how I got over being able to speak in front of people. I really do tap into that inner extrovert. I know it's in there, and it doesn't show itself all the time. But if I was on stage in front of a group of people, that's what I would call on to help me. And how do I do that? One is by, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, making it about the information, not about me. It's not about what are people thinking about me? What do I look like? What do they think of me? Do I sound okay? Is my voice all right? And am I saying the right words? I focus on the information I'm sharing and doing the best job I possibly can. And I'm also very honest with people. I can remember one of the first times I had to stand up on stage and give a talk. And I said to everybody, you might be expecting a motivational speaker or something like that. I am not that. I'm really nervous. I don't do very well at this, but I have information that I would love to share. And I'm going to share it. So I shared it. And then so many people came up to me afterwards and told me how much they appreciated that. And it's almost like it gave them permission to step up and just step up and be heard more, really. And, one time I wrote a book and I was asked to, if I would like to be interviewed on our local TV station. So of course I said yes. And then I got there and, there's the cameras and there's the microphone and I was very intimidated. And I just, again, focused on the information and sort of tried to tap into that inner extrovert. And I did my 5-minute interview. And then I went home, and of course, my inner critic's going, well, you should have said this, and you forgot to say that, and why didn't you do this? And I didn't think I had done a very good job. Well, they emailed me that same day and asked if I would go back and do another one. So I thought, well, it can't have been that bad, So I went back and I did another one. And again, the critical voice was, you missed out things and all of that. And then they asked me if I would be a regular on there. So for 2 years, once a month, I was their regular energy expert going on the TV, and it never got, I won't ever say it got easy. I never felt like a natural, but I was able to just tap into that part of myself that made it more about the information and the importance of sharing that. And even for example, in networking groups, when I first started my business and I had to go to a lot of in-person networking groups, those were excruciating for me. To go up to people, introduce myself, it's excruciating. But I learned that I actually do really well if I'm doing something. So I would volunteer to be on a committee or something like that, or be on the desk checking people in. And that way I get to talk to people and people get to know me. And that was a more comfortable way of doing it. That was my way of participating in those networking events. But again, it comes down to knowing yourself, being willing to step out and put yourself in the right situations for you, and just explore the possibility that if you're an introvert, that you've got a little bit of an extrovert in there, and allow that to come out sometimes when you need it to. Now, after I've done a presentation or something like that, I also know that I have to schedule the rest of the time that day for myself to wind down, because that's a big ask for me, to do that, to put my energy out there in that way. But again, self-awareness, I know what I need and I'm willing to give that to myself. So that's how they all sort of interplay together. But I would encourage people to explore the possibility that there's an inner extrovert in there. Or if you're an extrovert, you can tap into your inner introvert too sometimes if you need to do that.
Yeah. That's awesome. There's, again, so many amazing points we could go over and that are covered in what you've shared with us in all 3 points, but especially that last one. And I think you're absolutely right. When we've found something to share with other people that we're passionate about, that has transformed our lives from the inside out, often, whether it's a lesson or a resource we've discovered, those are the things that we want to share, because we know if they've caused that level of change in us, then they can create that kind of change in others. And so I think you're right that even if we are introverted by nature, we can, it's the whole idea of the 20 seconds of courage, type of thing, of just getting ourselves out there, getting ourselves up there. And the other element that I love that you shared was the idea of just being human, expressing when we're uncomfortable, expressing that the front of the crowd is not where we would naturally put ourselves, but because we care about them and we care about the topic that we've been asked to speak on, we're going to summon that courage and speak from that place of courage and love, and share our message. And then the other element of what you shared that I loved was that idea of just leaving time to recharge. We get to control that, and we get to put boundaries on where our time goes, and we can plan that time to recover and recharge. But I think also the thing that you shared that I know I've found true for myself is that inner critic that will come out in those times. And so I love that you've helped us to be ready for that. That even when we've because I think the expectation oftentimes is that we're going to put ourselves out there, we'll do the interview, we'll do the speech, and then we'll feel great about ourselves. And oftentimes we do, but then there is that kind of insidious voice that may come in. And so just realizing that regardless of how we may feel about that initially, we have to trust the feedback of the people that we care about and respect, who will tell us, no, you did a great job.
Hmm.
And ultimately, if there are some things that we can work on and do better, then that's great too. We can learn from that. But it's that idea of giving yourself grace, being gentle with yourself, and just celebrating the fact that you had that courage to step out with to begin with, and to share your message and share your story and share what was on your heart. Because I think so often we can skip that celebration and go straight to the inner critic. And I think it's amazing how over time we can become someone, the type of speaker that we never thought maybe that we could, just by taking that first opportunity to speak and giving it a chance, and
Yeah.
then learning from that and trying again. So I love, again, it's just another example, like you were saying, of that personal evolution, in the same way that your business has evolved over time. You've evolved and your message has evolved, and the tools and resources that you've gathered and that you can share now have all evolved. And I've loved every single topic and every point that you've made so far. So I can't wait to myself to dive into that download that I know we'll have with those other 7 points. But I really appreciate you sharing all that. Do you have maybe an overview or a couple of cliff notes version of what they'll find in the rest of that, or any highlights you want to make before we start
Well,
wrapping things
really,
up?
the beginning always has to come to knowing yourself. And if you follow those steps, it really, you can't go wrong. You truly can't go wrong. If you follow those steps, actually, not only will you be able to step up and be heard more and be valued and appreciated more, you will value and appreciate yourself more, but everything will start to improve. All relationships. The one thing people say to me, when we start working on one particular thing, perhaps, but the thing that surprises them the most is, as we're working on that, everything else improves. Their relationships improve, their job, career improves, everything improves. So these things are so fundamental that they impact every aspect of our lives. So yes, we're talking about being able to step up and be heard more and value ourselves more, but it impacts every aspect of your life. So do not underestimate the power of these simple steps.
That's amazing. I love that you shared that. And that's actually at the heart of the idea of the HSP awakening, is that idea of awakening to our authentic selves and awakening to the gifts that we all have to share with the world. And so I love how you've helped us to start to do that. And I know, again, there's going to be so much more value in that handout that you've got, or the download that we've got. But wow, just thank you so much for that message in particular, and how you've wrapped up with that, and just all of the value, all the insights. I know this is something I'm going to want to go back and listen to again and again. And I was here for it, but it's been incredible to have you. And I just appreciate you being willing to share your wisdom, and to get us all started on this journey, and maybe give us maybe the next steps. If we've been on this personal development or personal evolution journey for a while, there's still some valuable nuggets and exercises and tools that we can take from this. And so I appreciate your time and your willingness to share with us. Before I let you go, I'd love it if you would share with us maybe what are the best places, or where's the best place for someone who really has loved what you've shared to interact with you, or to find out more information about the amazing work that you're doing.
The best place is always to go to my website, which is just lindabinns.com. And that's where this handout is also going to be. It's going to be lindabinns.com/step up. I know you'll have the links. But on my website, there are the links to all my social media links. You can also schedule a time to chat with me, a complimentary call. I love learning more about people, finding out where they're experiencing challenges. No pressure. It's not about, signing up for anything. It's about getting to know people and learn if I can help them and how.
Wow. Amazing and beautiful. Thank you so much again for your time, for your wisdom, and for your heart that just comes through in everything that you share and everything that you're saying, just for being real and vulnerable with us, and sharing parts of your story that aren't the most glamorous, but just help us to know that it's okay to be human. It's okay to have these struggles, and that there are tools and resources and exercises that we can start doing even just today,
Yeah.
to begin evolving into that authentic version of ourselves that has the power to stand up and speak out, whether we're highly sensitive, whether we're introverted, no matter what. If there's that desire within us, we have the ability to follow through on that. So thanks for that amazing reminder today. I just appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
Josh. It's a pleasure chatting with you. It's as you can tell, I could talk about this all day, so I've
Absolutely.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, yeah, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in for this session. We again appreciate you being here for the summit and for this session in particular, and we will catch you in one of the future sessions as well. So take care, Linda. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.